In this episode, I tell you why losing fat might lead to you gaining weight. Hey, what's going on? What's going on? My name is Michael Sahno. Welcome to the Sea and Land Fitness Podcast. This podcast is, of course, brought to you by Sea and Land Fitness. So head on over to www.sandlfit.com. That's www.sandlfit.com and find out what we can do to help you begin or continue your professional fitness journey. This podcast is also brought to you by 511 Tactical, the makers of some of the best tactical fitness and fighting gear, with everything from, plate carriers and sandbags to socks, the best socks on the planet. So it's brought to you by 511 Tactical. We're also brought to you by Thorne Supplements. And what makes them so great is that what's on the outside of the bottle is inside the bottle. They use third-party verification for all of the ingredients that go into their products. So check them out. And we're also brought to you by RDX Sports, makers of some of the best combat sports equipment on the planet. We use their focus pads for our focus mitt knee raise exercise. They also make headgear, boxing gloves, protective gear, all kinds of stuff. So head on over, and there are discounts if you stay to the end, and I'll let you know all about them. All right, so welcome to this episode. So I'm a little off. I got new, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I got new headphones. I got in-ear like studio headphones, like news anchor headphones. So that, but they it's weird. There's like some kind of, when you cover your ears and you talk and you can't really hear, that's kind of what it feels like a little bit. But why don't I just turn up the volume in the headphones? That'll probably do it. Anyways, regardless, you're all here to find out about what I was talking about in the beginning, and that is how losing fat can lead to an increase in weight. And we'll go into that. Let me have a sip of my coffee. Peter Madeira, this is for you. All right, so what am I talking about here? I'm talking about toxins in adipose tissue. And adipose tissue is just another word for fat cells. So we have tons of adipose tissue inside our bodies. We have different kinds of fat cells, adipose tissue. We have what's called visceral fat. Everyone's probably heard about that. That's the fat around your organs. That's the fat around, your organs and, in the lower, central, deeper part of your body. Then we also have what's called subcutaneous fat. Subcutaneous fat is the fat that's right under the skin. It's our bellies, our donut around our waist. That's subcutaneous fat. Visceral fat is deeper. Now, I have always been suspicious of where all this fat comes from, because and the reason for that is we have historically eaten, I wouldn't say it's a poor diet. a diet that would be considered poor by the American Heart Association. So the American Heart Association basically says eating fats are bad. Um, they haven't gotten on board with the new science. And I'm not talking about the new science. I mean, like actual real studies that have shown that ingestion of fat in your diet, dietary fat intake, um, has little to no effect on your um, fat levels in your blood. Okay. So circulatory fat, meaning cholesterol, and, you know, clogged arteries and all of that. That comes um, from a different place. And I can go into a conversation about that, but that's not the subject of this specific conversation. The subject of this specific conversation is the existence of toxins in our foods. So ironically, I was downstairs prepping to get ready for this podcast, and a news article came out. And that news article, basically, I'm just going to read you the headline. Food dyes to be phased out by Trump administration in latest round of bans. So they're banning a number of things in the food supply. One of them is food dyes. Now, historically, I don't know if you guys know this or anyone general knowledge knows this, but food dyes, in order to make food dyes, we have to put some really shitty stuff into our mouths. Yeah, the pretty horrific things are used in the process of creating food dyes that create our foods. One of the things I didn't know about this. I was reading a book and about the redness of steaks. So this is not, it's related, trust me. So when you go to the grocery store and you look at steaks and they're red and you're like, I want a red steak, I want to look at that, it's a good cut. It apparently appeals um to the psyche to have a red steak. What I didn't know about this, and what most people probably don't know, is that, I mean, it's in a state of decomposition, whether you like it or not. It is in some state of decomposition. Once slaughter of the animal happens, every moment past the lack of blood circulating through that, the organs and the tissues of that animal from that moment they're slaughtered is in a state of decomposition. Part of what happens with that state of decomposition is a change in coloring. So red is seen as fresh in terms of meats from specific animals. So what they do is they hit it with carbon monoxide because it reddens the meat. It reddens the decomposing flesh of the beef or the lamb. I didn't know that. So there are a lot of processes that occur in order to get food to appear the way that you want it to. Like if you have sour cream and onion chives, sour cream and onion chive, sour cream, onion chives, potato chips, right? So they have those little flecks, those little green flecks. Well, they use green dye to color something that gets sprinkled on. I don't know what it is. We assume it's chives, but who knows? Now, a lot of the horrific uh chemicals that go into these dyes um are literally carcinogenic, are toxic, are bad for you. Okay, they lead to unlife. Certain things are healthy, they lead to long steady lives. Certain things are negligibly healthy, meaning they're not really that healthy at all. And then some things you just should not be putting in your mouth. Okay. The dyes that the FDA, I think it's the FDA. Let me look at this. Did I say the FDA? Hold on. Let me look at this. Regardless, the Health and Human Services secretary, the dyes that he just banned are you ready for this? Petroleum based dyes. So there are petroleum based dyes that we're putting into our mouths and digesting every single day. Now, in minute quantities, meaning small quantities, not that big a deal. The body is able to really, really, really process a bunch of this stuff, horrible stuff, and flush it out, get rid of it. Hold on, another sip of coffee. But and the reason we know this is because if you look at, I read this thing years ago. I think it was in college. I think it was a health book or something like that. But they were talking about this guy was going to be a doctor. It was a book. That's right. This guy was going to be a doctor. And part of the coursework to become a doctor, he had to take an anatomy class. And one of the cadavers, dead bodies, corpses that he had to examine and dissect was that of a man who was an alcoholic. And he was in shock when he went over this person's body. He's like, I don't understand how this person was alive. I don't understand how this person was able to live as long as they did. And one of the things that it left on him is that the impression it left on him was that the human body can take a ton of abuse, basically, a ton of abuse. What an interesting anecdote that isn't really related, but gives you an idea of how much the body can actually withstand. One of the things that I read years ago, and I read this when I was in the Navy, was that in one of our manuals that we had, and it was on nuclear, biological, and radiological training, NBC, NBCR, and is that a nuclear bomb, if it goes off, the human body, the human skin can keep everything intact from the force of the explosion. It's the burning that destroys us, meaning that the impact of a nuclear bomb, the forces that are generated from a nuclear bomb, depending on, I don't know how far away from the impact site it was, but you could withstand it. You die, you know what I mean? You would die immediately because all your organs would be crushed from the amount of G forces that were, the impact forces that are coming towards you. But you wouldn't be ripped to shreds. So the human body is designed to take a beating. And that's physiologically as well as like environmentally. And that's, like I said, evidenced by this alcoholic who the guy was like, I don't know. I'm looking at his organs. His organs had, he had cirrhosis of the liver. I think the guy smoked too. So, but bottom line, we can take a lot of abuse. The amount of fat that human beings get just from the normal human diet apparently doesn't equate to the amount of calories that we've been eating. So all right, so you do the math equation. It takes this many calories in to put on a pound of fat, right? Or an ounce of fat or whatever. And I found that there are times when I gain fat when I'm in a deficit and I'm not exercising. And I could never understand that. Or I'm maintaining and I'm like, I shouldn't be the weight that I am based on the intake of calories that I've had. And one of the things that I've found over the past couple of years, and through going to school and reading research articles, is that a lot of the fat that I have on my body is from, interesting, poor food choices, but not poor food choices like you would think. Not poor food choices, meaning I had too much cheese or I ate too many burgers. Um, Poor food choices in the sense that I opted to eat something that had a lot of preservatives and a lot of food dyes in it. Okay. And what my body did with that is or what I did to my body more exactly is that I overloaded my system with toxins, overloaded it to a point where it couldn't safely get rid of all of the toxins that I ingested. And because of that, what my body did was it said, hey, we can't strain all these toxins through his liver or his kidneys. We can't get rid of them all in the time that, you know, our makeup was designed to withstand. So we're going to have to take some of these toxins and we're going to have to store them. So let's get some of that fat from his diet and let's bring it into the digestion, out of the digestion, and pack some of these toxins in and we'll store it somewhere safe. Boom. I now have fat stores of toxins all over my body. We all have them. And it's nothing new. Hold on just one sec. I don't know if I'm 100% a fan of these earplugs. I might go back to my headphones. Anyways, so this is nothing new. This goes all the way back, and I just had a wonderful conversation with a doctor who has experience researching this, and he mentioned something that I hadn't even thought about. Think about fires. Well, fires, when they consume the fuel source that they have, they release toxins as part of the smoke. So one of them is benzene. So if you're around smoke and fires all the time, or if you're around a cooking fire way back in the 1600s, you would have fat cells that have benzene inside them, toxins that you need to release. If we look at in the past, leaded gasoline. So the population has lead in their adipose tissue that goes all the way back. You know, people who lived it during that time, if they never lost fat that they had at that time, it would have lead inside those fat cells. Now we have petroleum from the food dyes. We have a number of different preservatives from all the literal garbage, toxic chemical garbage that they use in order to preserve and make our food. So the reason I'm bringing all this up is because I'll tell you my story. My story is I have, some fat that I want to get rid of. I took the winter off, used it as an off season, and didn't get real fat, but just gained some weight, gained some fat. I could see it. I could see it. I was carrying some fat and I wanted to get rid of it. If you look at my face, I can't believe I'm saying this. There's some fat in my face. I have a moon face. So I want to get rid of it. I want to slim down a little bit. We're going into spring. We're going to be going into summer. And I want to get rid of some of this fat. So one of the things I noticed is that I almost immediately, gained about 7 pounds. Okay. Like, I know the body remembers, we genetically remember, I think it's 15 years of general physicality, shape that we have. Meaning, what I mean by that is that if you continuously work out and then take a little break, you're not going to lose your gains. Those gains will come back pretty relatively quickly, in no time at all. But I mean, a week or two and I'm gaining 7 pounds of muscle. No, that's unheard of. I am a freak beast. I'm that Doberman on steroids. But I'm not that, it's unrealistic. So I couldn't figure out where this weight was coming from. And I'm like, it's got to be water weight. But how do I get rid of this water weight? And I was noticing that there was creaking, aching in joints. And I'm like, what the shit? This is not cool. What is going on? I don't understand this. This should not be happening. One of the things that I always found interesting was that nobody talks about how when you go to lose fat, the side effect, not the side effect, but an effect of doing that would be the release of those toxins into your bloodstream. And what's the effect of those toxins in your bloodstream? And one of the things I found out in this article was that it leads to inflammation. And I was like, dummy, knucklehead. That's exactly what's going on with you. You're experiencing inflammation. And it's got to be related to me losing this fat, because one of the things, this is going to be gross. Sorry. So when I start to lose fat, my feet start to stink. I don't know why. It's just one of those things. But when the process of losing fat starts to occur in my body, I know when it's happening because my feet start to smell a specific way. Now I'm curious is if my feet smelling that way is not because of the fat being lost, but the toxins being released and evaporating out of my sweat glands. You know what I mean? I'm sweating the toxins, but that kind of makes sense. But the whole thing that I'm getting to is that I have some bad news. And I'm going to have a sip of coffee before I give it to you. Oop. So the bad news is, because of all of the toxins in our food supply and our ingestion, our eating and drinking all of those toxins, we now have those toxins in our body stored in the fat cells that we want to remove. And if we exercise and get rid of those fat cells, those toxins are going to be released into your bloodstream. That release of those toxins is going to lead to inflammation. Inflammation is going to lead to water weight gain. Long story short, you lose fat, you're going to gain some weight. How long does that last? The lifespan of your weight loss journey. So if you lose weight over 2 months, you're going to be inflamed for 2 months. If you lose weight over 6 months, you're going to be inflamed for 6 months. If you do this for 1 or 2 years, until you lose that fat or the fat you want to, you're going to be inflamed for that amount of time. The remedy for that is to hydrate, help push those toxins out. But that won't fully alleviate the inflammation. But I will tell you that those toxins will leave your system because it will be a shock and your body will want to be free of them. It's a shitty message I'm giving you, I know, but hang in there. Keep pushing. Eventually you will get to the weight loss goal that you want to, and the release of those toxins will eventually cease because you'll get to that point. So that's the first hurdle. The second hurdle, and I'm going to discuss that in another episode, is looking at how we keep those toxins out of our body to begin with. But for the purposes of this episode of this podcast, understand that it's just a part of our existence if you're trying to lose fat. Okay, if you're trying to lose weight, it's going to be something you're going to have to deal with. So I'm sorry. I don't mean to be that guy. I apologize. I want to have a better message. Well, it is a good message. I'm trying not to sneeze. Sorry. It is a good message because you're going to be flushing toxins out of your body. The only problem is in order to flush toxins out of your body, you got to suffer through the toxins going through that process. You're going to feel a little swollen. You're going to feel, but eventually over time, you're going to get into a steady state where you're not even noticing it really anymore. And over time, you'll feel better and better and better because you'll have less fat. You'll be losing less toxins. But in the beginning, when you're really, really trying to get rid of them, I do not want to sneeze. Sorry. I apologize. Curses of doing basically a full podcast is that if something like a sneeze shows up, you can't stop the podcast. So so that's basically it. It's just something you're gonna have to suffer through, but you're not suffering alone. We're all going through it. I'm going through it right now. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And if there's not a light, get on your hands and knees and start crawling because eventually that tunnel will end. You just got to get to the end of it. All right. All right. That is such a sour note to end on. I'm so sorry. But that's all I got for you. I hope you got something out of this. I hope it helped you understand a little more that this is not the end. And not to quit if you're like, hey, I'm trying all this and I'm gaining weight. Concentrate on, your size. Is your belly going down? Is your waist size going down? That don't become so dependent on the scale. Look with your eyes, get a measuring tape and, look at your clothes. Do your clothes fit more loosely? Those are better markers. And if you do get on a scale, get on something like an InBody where you can, or one of those, scales that tell you how much body mass, fat mass you have and stuff like that, how much water is in your body. Do that. It's going to be a better indicator of progress. So, all right. Hey, thanks a lot. Appreciate you listening. Gotta let you know this podcast again is brought to you by Sea and Land Fitness. Head on over to www.sandlfit.com. That's www.sandlfit.com. Check out our website. We got hats, we got shirts, we got watches, all kinds of great stuff. And we got programs to help you on your professional fitness journeys. So head on over there to check it out. Also, we're brought to you by 511 Tactical, makers of the greatest tactical fitness and just general tactical gear. We use their plate carriers and their sandbags, which are just beyond par. They're above par. They're beyond. They have no peer. They're the best. So head on over to the link in the description and get some of that gear. We're also brought to you by Thorne Fitness, makers of some of the best supplements. I use their supplements on the planet, and what's on the outside of the bottle is inside the bottle because they use third-party verification on their ingredients. So head on down to the link in the description below to get 10% off everything in the store that I have set up in their store on their website. And anything that you want put in that store, let me know. I can get you 10% off of it. Finally, we're also brought to you by RDX Sports, makers of some of the best fighting sports gear on the planet. They make boxing gloves, protective gear. We use their focus pad mitts for our focus pad knee raises. I also have their headgear and their body gear. And yeah, so head on over there through the link in the description below and get 10% off using the code right there. And yeah, that's all I got for you. All right, honey badgers, check you later. Out.